Lovely. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. You're very welcome. Just a few words of introduction from me first before we get going properly. My name's Alan Kinder, as I think you can see on the screen. I'm the Chief Executive of the Regional Studies Association, if I haven't had a chance to meet you already. Absolutely delighted to introduce this meeting of the Edgenet network today. If you're new to the network, or indeed some of you might even be new to the RSA, the first thing I would do is to encourage you to take a look at the Edgenet page on the RSA website, not necessarily now, but certainly at some point today. And I took a look at that page this morning, and I was really struck actually by these twin ambitions which are expressed there. One, to understand peripheries, both spatially and ideationally, and secondly, to explore the peripheries of research through experimental methodologies and heterodox theoretical perspectives. And when I read those two statements, they both seem to me to be very important, very innovative, and definitely the type of work that the RSA is committed to supporting. So that's a good start, I think, for everyone. As I say, for those of you who perhaps aren't familiar with the RSA, I know most of you will be, just a couple of words from me. We are, of course, a charity. We're registered in the UK, but we support a global community, actually, of regional and urban researchers, also policymakers and practitioners. We're also a membership organisation, and we're lucky to have a presence in over 80 countries worldwide. And if for some reason you're not a member of the RSA, I hope you don't mind me encouraging you today to go and join. I often talk about and describe the association as providing a sort of professional infrastructure. That's a term I often use for the regional and urban research communities. And we do that in practical terms through publishing 6 academic journals, 2 book series. We run conferences and events. And of course, more broadly, we advocate for the importance of regional and urban research. We also support research and researchers by awarding grants. And of course, that includes the research network grants that support these communities such as the Edgenet network. Over the years, from an RSA perspective, we found that these research networks are an absolutely fabulous way, actually, of connecting researchers, people with diverse perspectives, yes, but perhaps a shared focus. I've only been at the RSA, as some of you will know, for less than a year, but I already know from talking with members of our community that these research networks are actually often the way in which people enter the field of regional studies in the first place. And they certainly support our aim of producing research today, policy tomorrow, to use the RSA strapline. So we're really proud and really excited to support Edgenet for all the reasons I've talked about this afternoon. Perhaps less exciting, but nevertheless necessary. I've been asked to give a little bit of housekeeping, so I'll do that before I come off screen. So the webinar is being recorded. It will be made available on the Edgenet Research Network page after the event. Please turn off your camera, it says in my notes here, if you don't wish to appear in the recording. I understand the recording is going to be paused for the Q&A session. I think that's to give people a little bit more sort of space, if you like, to express themselves. So that's after the presentations. And please put any questions that you have in the chat box with a Q at the start and the name of the person it's directed to, if it's directed at somebody in particular. And then lastly, from me, before handing over into the capable hands of Madeleine, if you're on the socials, as they say, please use the hashtag RSA webinar, and that will help, if you're on Blue Sky, for example, get the message out there. So have a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful event. And as I say, it's my job now and great pleasure to turn over to Madeleine to pick up from you.
Yes, thank you so much, Alan, for this. And welcome everyone to this seminar about green dreams, green development, and green infrastructure projects, and their impacts on what we call peripheral places or small places. And my name is Madeleine Eriksson, and I am from Umeå University in northern Sweden, and my interest is doing research. My previous research, but also current research, is about mega projects and how they affect smaller places. So me and Joannie Willett and Michael Howcroft, who you will soon be listening to as well in this seminar, are part of this international and interdisciplinary network, Edgenet. And we all focus on doing research on peripheral regions and trying to highlight them and also why they matter. And the aim of this seminar is to learn from the experiences of practitioners and also researchers, of course, and how we can work together more effectively, and also more, perhaps more being supportive to one another in different projects relating to the green goals and green dreams that we all are battling with. And we believe that local communities face challenges today in different ways, and challenges to try and implement green development plans. And sometimes small places also need to handle big green infrastructure projects, and also the speed of green industrial investments and how to handle this. And sometimes we also feel that research is a bit detached from the challenges of smaller places. So that's the focus of this seminar. And we have 1.5 hours. And first out is Caroline Childs and Stephen Roberts from Cornwall in the UK. And they will give a short talk, introduce themselves, of course, and give a short talk about their work on career development, but also green skills and various sustainability projects that they have together with Joannie Willett from Exeter University in Cornwall. So please, Caroline and Stephen, welcome.
Thanks very much, Madeleine. Just while I wait for Alex to load the slides, by way of introduction, my name is Carrie, or Caroline, and I'm the Careers Hub lead working across Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. Steve is my colleague, and he leads alongside me on our employer engagement work and activity. So in terms of what the Careers Hub is, we are part of a national network of Careers Hubs. There's around 50 of us nationwide. And just in terms of geography, we're the one on the far bottom left. And we're essentially a partnership, and it's that sort of regional, I guess, development and how young people feel around that, because we're a partnership between what is essentially a central government organisation, the Careers and Enterprise Company, and then match funding through our local authority in terms of how those messages apply locally, but also about equity of careers advice across the country. So you've got that sort of quality and robustness underpinned by national research and evaluation. And so just in terms of who we are and what we're doing, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but essentially our aim is to sort of connect education and industry in order to really sort of transform, so change careers and education talent pipelines that we are developing across Cornwall. And what that essentially means is working with about 45 member schools and colleges, training and developing 80 careers leaders, and then working with a range of industry and business partners at different levels. So some of whom commit, I don't know, 2 to 5 hours a year to take those messages from industry into school, and some of them who make a commitment at really strategic board level. This is something we're committed to in terms of our future business ambitions and what that looks like in terms of mapping it into talent. So just in terms of Cornwall Council, I wanted to mention some of these things. We certainly haven't got everything perfect, but there are certain things that I think are really helpful to share. So we were one of the first local authority areas within the country to announce a climate emergency in 2019, and that's had a massive impact on the work and response. And so an action plan came out of that, and the council basically introduced a new way of assessing and deciding on infrastructure development. So they were following the donut economics, Kate Raworth's model around really deep consideration of social environmental impacts for every single major investment and infrastructure project that we did from 2019 onwards. In 2022, we commissioned and published a Green Skills Report. It's a weighty document, and we're going to be exploring some of the themes today during the course of this presentation. So next slide, please. And I think that's over to Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie, for setting the scene. So, so what are green skills and careers then? So if we're not an academic, we're not a researcher, we're not working in policy, but for us, we're working in education and industry. We'll all have our own ideas of what that might mean. But in the Green Skills Report that the World UK completed in 2022, they asked some 16 to 24-year-olds what they knew or if they knew about green skills, and their answer was pretty damning, really, and 9 out of 10 said that they didn't really know what green skills were. So this interesting trinomics infographic really kind of highlights the complexity of the ecosystem. If we're working inside it, that's all well and good. But from an education and industry perspective, in the bubble that we work in, we hear terms like green economy, eco industries, environmental transition, and green skills all the time. But what does that mean? And how does that translate to the people that we're working with in our schools, colleges, businesses, and communities? Now, if you Google the definition of green jobs, it'll come in many forms, as I'm sure you'll all know. In 2022, Cornwall Council commissioned Kavaya to conduct a deep dive into green skills and green jobs in Cornwall. And Cornwall Council, on the back of that, adopted the following definition, which you can see on the screen today, which is an interesting one. And if you look across Google, as I say, there'll be various definitions of what green jobs and green skills mean. But we've adopted this, and the report highlighted 3 different models of jobs for Cornwall. Those new and emerging occupations, more purist jobs that are kind of coming out and being developed and emerging, such as maybe wind turbine technicians and maintenance. Those green enhanced skills and occupations that we've got already. So the integration of green technologies in the design of buildings, architecture, and the adaptations of materials and the efficiencies that come with that. And then those green increased demand occupations, those ones that sit within the infrastructure on a day-to-day basis and the supply chain that really underpin what's happening across Cornwall, our land, our sea, and all that infrastructure that we work within. So what do we already know? Well, there is a global challenge. We're all part of that, and there is a green transition that is very much underway. And that will continue to reshape the labour market and impact on people and place here in Cornwall. I do believe that it presents both a challenge, but also an opportunity for us to educate the workforce of the future and provide those good jobs and training for people on lower wages. But it also highlights the work that we do within education and industry and the importance of how we bridge that gap around promoting green careers and work opportunities in that transition as people move out of education into the world of work as our future workforce. Yes, we've got our challenges. We're all aware of those, but Cornwall does hold and possess competitive advantage in terms of our natural assets on the ground, the land, and our seas, to help us play a role in sustainability, innovation, and ensure we have economic vitality. On the next slide, you'll see that we have a 10-year vision for Cornwall, which is set out in our recent Good Growth Plan. And that highlights those kind of 3 different models of sectors that we've got here. The distinctive sectors, those specialised ones with different strengths and assets that are emerging. Our core sectors, which are the heart of the economy, our visitor economy, agri-food, fishing, our creative and cultural sectors, which play such an important part. And then underpinning that, our foundational sectors, which are very much the basis of which our society functions. Over to you, Carrie.
Thanks. In essence, what I'm going to do now is hopefully in 7 minutes take you through 3 case studies, one from an industry perspective, one in terms of primary careers related learning, and then the final one in terms of a linked project in terms of tech skills, all of which I think are influenced and or involve elements of social research. So the first one is a case study around floating offshore wind and the development of that industry in Cornwall. Essentially, Cornwall Council established an arm's length company, Celtic Sea Power, to act as the conduit front door to industry and industry partners. It's interesting that Celtic Sea Power work regionally, so they work across Cornwall, Devon and South Wales, not just Cornwall. And essentially they've been doing a number and range of things. What you see here, the guy you see in both of the pictures is a guy called Olaf, and essentially he's their workforce skills manager. And so he's been doing things like mapping skills, supply and demand. He's then building that into a quality mark that's reflected in our sort of education. Our Green Skills report recognises the need to build and enhance delivery in that sort of level 3-4 area. There's more going on at higher education level. And he's also really active in terms of, I guess, planning and preparing pathways into industry. And even though it's not his job, he's done over 500 engagements with children and young people, because essentially what we're talking about here is what some of our industry partners would call a unicorn. It doesn't necessarily exist here in Cornwall in strength, but yet through their workforce planning, they understand that their potential future workforce is essentially one that is sitting in our primary schools currently. And how do you communicate with those children and young people what a future in floating offshore wind looks like, and the opportunities and the skill sets that's required in that industry? And Olaf is this sort of expert communicator to take those messages down. So on the top left there, this is a webinar that we did talking to teachers in the area to explain to them about the potential of floating offshore wind. And then underneath is part of our primary careers related learning. We actually put together a series of short films that talk to children and young people about the development of these industries across our region. So just bringing it back to our original contact and where this came from, I think Joannie might talk about this later on, but essentially it started with a piece of social research, and I might have butchered Joannie's original research question here. She'll have to correct me, but essentially the question we were asking children in our primary schools is, how do you feel about the place where you live? How do you feel about a future here? And understanding these sort of positive and negative elements of that. From that initial piece of research, we caught the attraction of Careers and Enterprise Company, our national funder, who invested in us as one of 4 areas of primary careers-related learning. It was a national first. It hadn't been done, that sort of central government consideration of what careers work looks in primary school hadn't been done before. And so it was a really interesting, and what it allowed us to do was expand the conversation further. To include more teachers, to train them and do quite lovely projects like this. So what you see on the screen in front of you is a picture of the Bluebell pendant lamp, which is basically part of a project that was designed by primary school children in Cornwall, and is made out of recycled beach plastics and is now being retailed as part of the Soho Lighting Connection. So there's that example of that, bringing industry and children and young people together and working on those real life projects. So the outcome of that Start Small, Dream Big project is now forming national insight documents, the second of which was released this week, if anyone's interested in finding out more. And I guess the conversation about primary careers related learning and how that could map into policy in future is ongoing. And then just finally, I'm sorry about the maybe slightly overly complex slide. Just bear with me and I'll talk you through this. This is an example, not specifically of green skills, this is about tech skills. And a piece of research that we undertook with the South West Social Mobility Commission, essentially exploring the idea about how can people from under-resourced backgrounds help to plug the gap in our tech supply, the supply gap in our tech industries. And through a series of, research questions, conversations, it was essentially established that those people need access to tech equipment, they need access to tech-savvy people, and they need access to tech events and hubs. Then there was the next piece of the research in that box there talked about, well, what kind of job opportunities exist within this field? And a massive percentage you can see there, something like 70% of the jobs were in 3 areas around software development, networks and system engineering and network support. So then what is it that you need to build a successful career in those industries? And it was essentially tech qualifications, a portfolio of work and some soft skills. So essentially what we're trying to do is raise awareness and form what this is called the tech supply funnel that takes you right from a basic awareness of understanding tech and how it has influence and interest in my life, all the way down to achieving maybe tech employment and to be thriving within the tech industries. And essentially, so from all that research, the Commission essentially then suggested 8 interventions that were required to enable people to get those networks, to access those qualifications, to develop the portfolio and soft skills. And within that, they undertook analysis about which were the easiest of these and the most impactful to implement. Again, it was almost like a situation of planned happenstance, where we were then able to apply for some national funding through the Careers and Enterprise Company supported by Salesforce to be able to develop a regional approach to this. So this activity and this series of interventions is now being developed across, well, being implemented across Cornwall and Devon, with the potential to scope across a wider regional and potentially national basis. And then just lastly to mention, I think Joannie might talk about this, but the first conversation I ever had with her, I think I'd seen her publish some research or an article, probably in a business magazine, and we met up for a coffee. And at that time, she explained to me the nature of the research that she was doing, that she was talking about things, how rural peripheral areas presented ourselves, how we potentially interlinked with a wider economic system, and also how people were affected as industry changed over the course of time here. And I guess it set me on a really interesting sort of dialogue. And at the same time, we were just launching the Careers Hub. So when we launched the Careers Hub, the challenge that we set, those careers leaders working in our schools and colleges, and the industries that wanted to work with us, is that we are talking about the future of Cornwall. And how are we going to articulate that, including our need for technology and green skills? And how is it that we are going to interact with those future generations to really help them to understand and navigate this changing job market, but also one that can be surrounded sometimes by a lot of negativity, talking about the things that we've lost? And how do we talk that with a sense of reality in terms of that low wage, low skill economy, but also with a sense of hope for the future? And I think that's it from me.
Impressive. A wonderful presentation. Yeah, on time. And yeah, a lot of thoughts in our heads, I'm sure. But we will continue with Owen King from Green and Healthy Frome. And you work with Michael Howcroft on different green regional development projects. The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me. Shout at me if you can't. Thanks, Caroline and Stephen. That was really interesting. I'm here from Frome Town Council in North Somerset. And I am the climate action researcher, which is another sort of title to say that I lead the evaluation of the town council's kind of vehicle for climate action, which is called Green and Healthy Frome, which is a partnership between ourselves here at the council and Frome Medical Practice and a local organisation called Adventure, which is all about sort of entrepreneurship and training for things like green skills. And the talk what I want to talk today about is Frome as an example of the kind of development of a democratic kind of infrastructure for green dreaming in a peripheral or marginal place. Less about kind of skills and education and careers. A bit more in this case about local democracy and politics and community engagement and inclusion, or participation, I would say more accurately. Green and Healthy Frome is funded by the National Lottery Community Fund, which was secured. Development grant was secured in 2021, and 2 years later we got a full award to continue this project until April next year. The focus is on the relationship between health and climate in particular, and there are a number of strands of the project which kind of focus on that kind of relationship and try to engage the community in the co-benefits of health and climate. In particular, there's a healthy home strand which helps people with home energy, warmth in the home, and issues with damp and the health implications of that. Also, active travel. We've got a Cycle Together scheme which gives free e-bike loans, and also from the medical practice, social prescribing and deprescribing and lifestyle support is a major element. The graphic on the right there is one of aspect I want to talk about a little bit more later, which is Future Shed, which is our branch of the program which kind of supports local community groups with training and support and funding through residencies, year-long residencies, to develop their programs in relationship to health and climate. So Future Shed has been a big sort of network that's emerged out of this project. So yeah, also a big part of the project was focused on evaluation, which is kind of my role here. You know, there's a significant investment in trying to evaluate the project. And that's kind of part of the reason why I ended up in conversation with Michael. And it was you know, a mutual opportunity for us to kind of develop a different perspective through which to interpret and share our approach and our story in Frome here. And to think about peripheries and margins as a way that kind of lead to a focus on place. Frome and the things that have been happening here can be seen as an example of kind of innovative placemaking. So much like Cornwall, Frome has always been a place on the periphery, well away from kind of political centres. It was, you know, in the early modern period, it was a place of kind of religious non-conformism. Later, it was organised labour and Chartism. Has a very deep industrial history here of cloth making and metalworking and printing, and also of kind of dissent and resistance and resistance and riots and things like that. So it's a market town and a centre for agriculture. So it's kind of interface of the rural and the urban, of kind of extraction and commodification. So more recently, it's become kind of a bolt hole for activists, artists, environmentalists, and in particular, as I alluded to, a kind of a radical democratic movement that saw an independent takeover of the town council. And it's this movement in that sort of historical context, and a kind of collective imaginary that is local, community focused, redistributive, and regenerative in a way, environmentally, that a kind of this social infrastructure for green dreaming kind of began to emerge. And that started really with the emergence of Independence for Frome, which was a political party that was founded in 2011. And it was led by some of the people here in this picture who were previously part of Sustainable Frome, which was linked to the Transition Towns movement. And what motivated them was a kind of a growing frustration with local development, and the kind of need to, you know, reassert an identity in the town, which was less ideological in terms of party politics, and less kind of top down. And so they formed a political, it wasn't a political party, it was a political group that ran councillors in the elections in 2011, on the basis of a different kind of identity, which was around the community and around the commons, which was redistributive and participatory, and regenerative, and an emphasis on the local, and drawing on that independent kind of spirit of the town. So Independence for Frome won a majority of the 2011 town council elections, and so what that kind of spurred was a kind of overlap of networks that were very kind of locally community based, which centered on Sustainable Frome and then were channeled through Independence for Frome. So we had a kind of suddenly an overlap of networks between the community and the local government. And sort of behind these kind of key nodes on this diagram here, particularly sustainable stream, there's a whole network of community groups and interests and relationships in interests in development and environment in the town. And what this led to was these networks, these formal and informal networks between government and the community, which were previously quite separate, became overlapping, and they became sort of networks of knowledge and action. So we had a kind of blossoming of a whole range of niche interest groups, friends of groups, Save Our this, interested in local development, people for spaces in the town who are looking to protect against different types of development. This kind of attracted. This coincided with an explosion of social media and a sort of increased networking around these kind of issues. And meanwhile, the town council, as a progressive council, started to attract high caliber staff, and they became more kind of, or less kind of risk averse in terms of investing in new roles. So councillors started to support all sorts of new roles with more of an emphasis on supporting the community to engage in how things are done in their local area. And so gradually you start to get this development of a kind of political and social infrastructure through which local interests could be represented. And this led to a whole bunch of kind of successes around protecting open spaces, opposing developments. Most recent one, which is in the press and the Guardian, was around Saxonvale development, which is a long saga, but also enhanced investment in climate action in particular. And what that led to was eventually securing this funding for Green and Healthy Frome, through which the town council's agenda on climate action could be kind of channeled. So these kind of two things around development and planning and climate and environment. I feel like I've zoomed through, but that's nearly 10 minutes, so I'm okay. So I think where we're at the moment, coming towards the end of the Green and Healthy Frome project, we're kind of at a stage of taking stock of what to do next. We're kind of beyond the point of declaring climate emergencies and, beyond almost, net zero, or a new kind of ecological situation that we're having to consider things like adaptation in the community more prominently. And at the same time, we've kind of at the back end of austerity and decentralized funding, which actually funded the Green and Healthy Frome project. And so now we're at a big stage of thinking about how do we support these initiatives and energies that have been developed, these networks that have been created to go forward and to be self-sustaining. As much as my role involves evaluation, there is challenging to evaluate place-based initiatives according to kind of climate change narratives. And at the same time, we have these intensifying these intersecting crises around climate health and the economy. But at the same time, we have this Saxonvale development, which is a huge thing for the town, and the potential for more networks to sort of be articulated around the spaces that we created in that new development, which is very much community focused, and that site was sold to a community developer rather than a commercial one. The Nature Towns and Cities initiative, which is coming out of the National Trust and Natural England, is something that provides a big opportunity for us going forward, and that's something we've already submitted expression of interest in being accredited as. So that's just a short kind of introduction to what's happening in Frome, and like I say, I think this partnership with Michael and with this project is an opportunity for us to kind of imagine a sustainable future in a different way, towards more local adaptation.
Thank you, Owen. Really fascinating stuff. So now I will give the opportunity to Joannie Willett, political scientist, doing research on regional science, but very much focused on Cornwall and the development of Cornwall, the industries of Cornwall. So you have 10 minutes to reflect on what you've been doing together with Caroline and Stephen the past years. And
thank you for that, Madeleine. That's really great. I also have to say that right now I am sitting here slightly reeling in a very good way, because every time that I talk to Carrie and Stephen, we catch up reasonably regularly. I'm just always totally blown away by the stuff that they're doing and like the innovative like nature of the stuff, and like so that I didn't know about the Soho Lightning project, and it's like, oh, that is absolutely amazing. It is, or they probably told me and it's just gone over my head, or because there's so much other stuff going on as well. And anyway, so I just wanted to share how I do have some slides, but they're more about things to kind of hang on to rather than have any content. So I'm just going to share them for a moment. Cool. So I wanted to start out by talking a little bit about the working relationship that we've had. It started basically through serendipity, a complete serendipity. So I was introduced to Carrie via a random contact that I met at a business lunch when I was presenting something. I was doing some, you know, there's a difference, isn't there, between like really understanding something and kind of like dipping your toe in and going, oh, there's an interesting story here. And I was thinking about skills a little bit, and I presented some preliminary research at a business lunch, and somebody goes, oh, you need to speak to Carrie Childs, gave me Carrie's email address. And anyway, we ended up sort of having all kinds, ended up from there. I remember the coffee in the at the university, Carrie, and talking through things. And but the thing that really strikes me is about literally how it was all about luck, and getting out there into the wider community. And fortunately, somebody that I encountered was able to connect me with the work that Carrie's doing and all of that kind of stuff. And it just made me think quite a bit about the importance for us as researchers in being able to create the spaces where we can have those serendipitous chance encounters, and they end up developing. And so, yeah, so then I was thinking a lot about looking for opportunities. So we'd had these initial conversations, and it was clear that we were both intrigued by the kinds of things that we're doing. And then I was just thinking about sort of stuff that happened over the next couple of years. And I was thinking about taking my research further, and Carrie Carrie introduced me to some other people who got me thinking about a whole load of other things, and I suppose that threads into a major issue that we have a major issue that it feels like we have in peripheral areas more generally, which is where the economies that we don't always see, or we very often don't see a lot of the amazing economies that we have in the rural. Very often, so thinking about from a Cornish perspective, but also on work that I've done in other parts of the world as well, particularly in the US, but thinking from a Cornish perspective, part of the reason why it is so amazingly surprising to see about the Soho Lighting project, for example, is that we have a very dominant narrative that goes, by the way, Cornwall's a very pretty place. People come here on holidays, and not a lot else really happens. And so really thinking about storytelling and how information about Cornwall's economies becomes shared, but also thinking about the different thinking about the opportunities, the more environmental awareness brings with it as well. And certainly in the UK context, in the UK context, at a national level, government seems to have this idea that green skills or doing economies environmentally takes or environmental considerations take something away from the national economy. You know, it's something that there's just an announcement today that there might be a new runway at Heathrow Airport. This is all about growing the economy from a government that was really interested in being extremely environmental right at the start, and now they're rowing back, and it's like economy's not, but but instead, one of the things that's amazing, or that rural and peripheral, or areas that are considered as peripheral and rural areas can show us, is about that actually people are taking our environments and are actually and they're using it in novel ways for actually growing the economy in all kinds of different things, including using marine plastics as a way. I'm just going to, my video's unstable, I'm just going to turn my video off, including using marine plastics as a way of like developing the economy. So it's all about like keeping relationships alive, looking for opportunities to be able to work together. And then Carrie came up with another set of opportunities, or another way of another set of things that she was thinking about. And we did something around COVID with schools and in the US as well. And then that idea kind of ended up morphing and growing. And I really wanted to highlight how my slides aren't working yet. I really wanted to highlight how working with Carrie and Steve has been a co-evolution. Or for me, it's been a co-evolution. I have learned so much about what the particular focuses are, what the issues that the issues and policy and policy landscape that they are facing, which then presents the landscape looks like for Carrie and Steve with regards to skills in Cornwall, and then I'm able to tailor my research to be able to better reflect those kinds of needs and requirements. And also, I feel like they've both been sort of introducing me to a whole new language, because like academia very definitely, I can see Carrie rolling her eyes. Academia very definitely has a specific set of languages about how we do things. And at the same time, so does the council. And I feel that Carrie has actually, Carrie and Steve have been a really, really important guide to, so not just in terms of doing research, but actually becoming embedded into policy concerns, policy issues and policy questions. And then what they've also been able to do is, and this is again incredibly important, is that they've been able to sense check some of the stuff that we have come up with from a research perspective. So they've been able to make sure that the ideas that we develop from our research actually has a practical application and actually fits with the kinds of issues and concerns that they have. And I feel that this is also really important. It's like it feels like it's a really important set of feedback loops that kind of keeps us a bit.
Did we lose Joannie? So dramatic. the Cornish internet. But I think that she managed to give us her message, I think. And so thank you so much, Joannie.
There was another thing I was going to finish on, but I'm not going to, because I'm all a bit flustered and we need to move on. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Joannie. Yeah, I think most people here, the researchers, wants to contribute with something meaningful to stakeholders and so forth. But it's really difficult sometimes. But it's wonderful when it happens. So thank you for this. And now I will introduce Michael from Glasgow University, and you've been working with civic society, with local policy and national policymakers for some time, and also reflect a bit on the work you've been doing with Owen and his organization. So please, Michael.
Thanks, Madeleine. I'm going to start by saying I feel like an imposter in lots of academic spaces, to be honest, but I particularly feel like an imposter in a space talking about green infrastructure and green energy, because that's not my specialism at all. But my work and my project and my partnership with Owen and others, which I'll talk about in this presentation, is about how we imagine together. And so I hope that what I might contribute, and some of the questions that I've got for everybody already, are about dreaming, the process of dreaming, and what that brings to these discussions, and the different actors that enlist the idea of dreaming. So I'm Michael Howcroft. I'm at the University of Glasgow. I'm funded by a UCRI Future Leaders Fellowship, which has just started. So I'm right at the beginning of this partnership with Owen. So thanks so much for Owen for coming today and sharing your reflections and telling us about Frome. So my project is interested in understanding contemporary civic cultures, testing international ideas and models of participation and research methods. And I hope to continue Joanie's point about how it's contributing to the world, that I hope that this will support civic challenges. I'm not going to get too much into the concept of the civic in this conversation, but understanding what the civic is and the cultural dynamics of the civic is central to the project. So essentially, civic imaginaries are the ways that people think, feel, and dream about the futures of their places. And this has lots of impact for developing urban theories, practices of place-based practice and place-based policies. And there's a real turn, particularly in the United Kingdom, to develop an advanced place-based, people-centered policy. The project will develop and enable learning and knowledge exchange with international partners, including a centre that's of particular interest to me, which is the Civic Imagination Office in the municipality of Bologna in Italy, where they have established really strong roots between the various communities in the municipality and the town council, and how the art practices in particular can encourage participation in local decision-making and policy development. And this responds to new policy agendas in the United Kingdom around place partnerships, which will be very familiar to those of you from policy in the United Kingdom. And most recently, that includes the UK Treasury published their new areas of research interest. And one of them was where has citizen engagement in policy making worked well, and what key lessons can we take from this? To put Frome in context with the rest of my project, I'm working with partners around the country, Glasgow, Hull, Chester, Frome and Southampton, that all in different ways might be considered marginal, whether that they're on the economic margins, whether they're on geographic margins, whether they're on social margins. There are lots of different reasons why these places understand themselves, and the neighbourhoods that I'm working with understand themselves as marginal. And working through the theory, the practice, the methods of civic imagining, how we might address local civic challenges. For example, in Hull, it's working with young people and understanding their attitudes towards voting and democracy. Hull has one of the lowest voter turnouts in the country, and the community that we're working with there has the lowest voter turnout in the country at the last general election and the last local elections. And you can see the others there. With Chester, we're working on public-private placemaking partnerships. In Southampton, we're working with various communities on community cohesion. And in Frome, we're working with Owen and partners there on the lived experience of green dreaming, with a particular interest in the Future Shed project that Owen had introduced earlier. So I'm interested in the way that people dream, and can we share lessons between these different challenges through the process of understanding how dreams become reality and contribute to policy. As Owen mentioned, Frome is unique in its political culture and the structures, the infrastructures that exist to support the green dreaming that's happening there. And so that's interesting academically. It links with literatures of social infrastructures, of citizenship infrastructures, which talk about the intangible as well as the tangible infrastructures that we all live with and through. And they include the physical and relational, and they have their own temporalities, often which are very fragile. And I also want to draw attention to the idea that the imagination isn't purely fancy, but the imagination also has its own set of infrastructures. And there's some really exciting work coming from neuroscience about different models of imagining and cognition that are already being applied in education studies, for example. And so through the project, I'm interested in learning about how we might apply those new models and infrastructures of imagining within applied settings across a different range of challenges. So I'm again really grateful to Owen for partnering with us on this project, and that partnership will enable us to answer, hopefully, some of these questions around the cultural and locational specificities and characteristics of civic imagining. Is it the same in Hull as Frome or Southampton or Glasgow? How do grassroots organisations interact with official and state institutions? Again, the political culture of Frome is unique in that respect. And the ways that artistic or other creative practices inform or shape civic imaginaries. To pick up on some of the issues that Joannie was raising there, I'm an early career academic. As an early career academic, some of the live challenges are around engaging with the challenges around peripheries becoming an academic resource. And Darren McGarvey wrote an excellent book a few years ago called Poverty Safari, which might be familiar to some of you here. And being aware that the processes that we need to develop are about embedding reciprocity and a clear ethical framework. And where and how is my engagement with Frome and this fellowship, is it adding value? How do we transfer learnings between place and challenges? And how do we embed people-centered, place-based approaches within a context dominated by space-based or econometric approaches? I was really interested, Owen, in what you were saying there about the kind of metrics that are currently used with climate, understanding climate policy and evaluating climate policy. So that's a really rich conversation that I think we can continue to have. There are also dangers, I think, in this space of academic and applied practice of overpromising. From my own experience with a fellowship, you have to promise the world almost. And I think there's a danger about balancing the promise to the funder who wants big, ambitious ideas and what you can actually achieve on the ground, which I think relates to my earlier point about how we work ethically and in a reciprocal manner with our partners. And then the other point that I don't know where I am with this quite yet, but I'm an outsider in Frome. I'm not from Frome. I visited. I will visit and will be working in Frome when it comes to the field work with my team. I'm from Hull, so I'm more of an insider with that community. But that's something that I think is in conversation with the Joanie's work with the partners in Cornwall. That is a challenge that's live in my head at the moment. And that's me, Madeleine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Brilliant, and also wonderful that you bring up one of the themes for the seminar about the green dreaming. That theme is important, I believe, and I think that we have interesting examples here from the presentations where you actually get the space and the time for dreaming a bit. But yes, thank you so much. I think that we will continue right away with Caroline again and Stephen. And I wonder if you have any comments, reflections, response to Joanie's previous talk, and how you can continue working with her in future projects as well. So please.
Yeah, Steve, over to you. Is that all right?
Yeah. I'm happy to cover it. I mean, thanks, Joanie and everyone else for their interesting presentation. So, some takeaways or suggestions or challenges, I guess, from myself and Carrie. I think based on the work that we're doing on the ground within education and industry, is the kind of big question, I think, which we touched on, is around, what does green jobs, green skills, careers mean in real terms from a practical day-to-day for people in our communities? And I know, Joanie, we kind of challenged that narrative a little bit when you're talking with your kind of research academic head on in the world that you work in, that in reality on the ground, all of these great papers and all of these pieces of work that are going on and the funding that's coming into the Cornwall and the training and development that's taking place, how does that really have an impact on that, on what you just touched on there, that kind of person-centered, place-based approaches in our communities. So I think that's one question, one challenge that I would kind of throw out there for researchers and social scientists. Now, the next one, I'm not sure that whether this is something that can be taken forward to kind of put towards policymakers and leaders and the relevant people. But from my experiences working with school and in education and industry, is that the need to adapt the current education system and the curriculum that we have currently in place to help address those emerging skills needs for future green careers and growth here in Cornwall. Industry is saying that they don't have, young people aren't coming out of education with the right skills and qualifications to then deliver on some of the working with the technologies and the jobs that are being developed and emerging, and that landscape's changing through some of the work that we're doing with industry and schools, kind of fusing that together. So I think there's a question there to be had, and different kind of elements of that we need to look at in a little bit more detail. And then I think there's something in there around that transition, that just transition that involves people in low skill, low paid jobs, and also young people, and the opportunities that they may have to fulfill their kind of aspirations and their dreams for living and working in Cornwall as well. The narrative that we get quite often is that young people need to leave Cornwall to thrive and to develop. So we need to try and change that and inspire them and keep them here in Cornwall, and kind of use their skills and their passion about where they live and what they've got to provide as young people and as people generally in our communities. I don't know whether you want to add anything else, Carrie.
think you've got it perfectly, but for me, it's that conscience piece about aligning the development projects that happen and the aspirations of young people. Like it's kind of been an undertone of the entire conversation, isn't it? And how we bring that into land.
Yeah, I also think it's important to ensure that we include our young people and our people in the communities as a voice to help influence that. We've been doing a lot of work with the Youth Council and other youth groups where they're telling us maybe what we don't want to hear, but they're telling us exactly how it is for them as they kind of grow up and emerge from, you know, what we've all had to deal with post-COVID and the changes and the challenges that presented us with as well. So it's a very different world to what it was 10, 15 years ago. And I guess that's highlighted in the emerging papers and the reports that are all being written and developed. But, you know, we've really got to drill down and bring it down to reality and what's happening on the ground for the people in place in Cornwall as well. And I think that's the challenge for me to researchers, policymakers and academics is that, you know, yeah, it's got to be a reality to it as well, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really interesting. And then also I believe that, I mean, the kind of struggle also to make the national government, national policies understand what's going on the ground. So it's not only academics, it's also the national policies that are really not helping all the time. Thank you so much. So I'm just going over to Owen. Please, do you have any response to what Michael just talked about?
Yeah, I wrote down a few things. It was interesting, and Michael's described it in that way before, about wanting to understand how people think about their futures, how people think about kind of green futures and sustainable futures in marginal places like this, and particularly like the lived experience of green dreaming sort of made me think of a conversation I had this morning with one of the kind of leaders of the Independence for Frome movement, who's also one of the leaders of Sustainable Frome, in that this kind of process of green dreaming and for those kind of ideas to be realized in some way is not necessarily linear or coherent or even really very planned. It's just people coming together and stuff kind of happening. So that those kind of conversations we might have as working together on this project with you know, the latest kind of set of groups who are interested and engaged around the Future Shed strand of the Green and Healthy Frome project, who are doing projects like a river vision project. They're doing textile reuse and things like this. So that's kind of a different thing, I guess, to politics. It's more about you know, quite niche interests, people who are wanting to do something that's you know, in opposition to kind of consumerism or something like that. But anyway, I just thought that was an interesting reflection. It was also interesting to see Rob Hopkins' book in one of your images, because that's one that's definitely on the shelves here in the office. I've seen it dotted around quite frequently, so that's definitely something. His What If book is definitely something that's a key reference point for people here. Yeah, how grassroots organizations interact with official institutions. I think that aspect is key to what happened here in Frome over the last decade, in that we went from a situation where the relationship between local government and the community was one of very much barriers being thrown up, things being imposed, and what happened with the kind of elimination of party politics at this level. That's not to say party politics in general has disappeared, you know, and even the councillors themselves would you know, be at some point on a political spectrum, perhaps in terms of their views. But in terms of how the Independence for Frome group operates at a council level, the emphasis was very much put on supporting the community with knowledge and so that they are able to engage with things that are happening in the town and are able to subject them to scrutiny. So it shifted very much towards, you know, a bi-directional kind of relationship. And yeah, on being an outsider, I think I'm an outsider too. And Frome is a place that's full of outsiders. And what is an outsider anyway? I don't know. I think you know, Frome is again, this conversation I had this morning, you know, Frome is a place where lots of people have come and gone because of the, you know, of stories they've been told about what's happening here and the kind of opportunities that are available. So you know, negotiating our position as an outsider is something we all have to do. And it'll be interesting to talk more about practice, specifically artistic practice. The leader, the kind of person who's responsible for FutureShed, Sue Palmer, she comes from an arts background, and she describes the way she approaches managing the various community groups who are supported through that program. She's described how she do it as very much informed by art, you know, an arts practice approach, in terms of how she engages with those individuals and what have you. So yeah, that's kind of the things I thought of.
Wonderful, thank you. And you're so good with timing. So now, yeah, we will try and I don't know, summarize this in some way, our impressions and thoughts, just from the organizers together, and if it's okay. And after this, we will also open the floor for questions. But yeah, so what I'm thinking, I'm really struck by these wonderful projects and also these wonderful people that are active and practitioners working with the people, and also really acknowledging that places are local and they are unique. And I also am struck by the kind of commonalities. I'm from northern Sweden. We have the challenge of depopulation and elderly population. It's a bit similar to the Cornwall case, and I'm really struck by the way that you try to show the kids that the place belongs to them, that they are also they can contribute to some kind of green transformation in future, and also to contribute to their education and learning in by teaching and learning different skills that are attractive and needed in the future. So I'm struck by that, and of course the way that Frome, I'm sure, I mean, that's a really kind of progressive and a really interesting case. I don't think we have anything similar from where I'm from, but I'm struck by, I mean, that these kinds of projects really need time. I mean, so from the kind of green transformation, the green industries, they don't give you time. They don't give you time to react on investments or, but we need to kind of make them give us time to envision an alternative future, and also perhaps come with demands on big global capital, for instance, that want to settle in the periphery because we have natural resources or whatever. But yeah, I mean, the place-based perspective is of course, I mean, something that these projects share, and you do it in the different ways, but it has to do with bringing particular marginalized people into the center of attention. Joannie?
Hi, yes, thanks for that, Madeleine. I was just really sort of struck. My top takeaway from today has been about finding ways to better align the interests, knowledges, and needs of people and the environments in which we live, and also the economies through which these grow and develop as well. And I'm also struck by, I can't remember if it was Carrie or Steve who was talking about finding ways to address the reality of people's lives. But the thing that I'm really getting from your work, Owen and Michael, is about social infrastructure. And it's fascinating to me, because on another project that I'm doing, we're doing a whole bunch of stuff about how political or activity on the ground changes the policy or the environment within which policy works, at a local government level, but also at a UK-wide level, at a national level as well. And you've got this kind of like interrelationship between on the ground local and national. But I'm also really aware that whilst that kind of stuff happens around, for example, wanting a cleaner, greener planet, we don't have that in some areas, and we don't have that with regards to skills. So people might say things like, in Cornwall, people might say things like, oh, there's no work here, you know, fishing's gone, farming's gone, mining's gone, all we've got left is, or I'm just also remembering being at an event with Carrie a couple of months ago, and there was a whole bunch of people going, oh, we need more careers advice in schools, and we need better apprenticeship schemes. And Carrie was like, this stuff is happening, but it's just that those people don't know about it. And I'm just really struck by the differences there about how in some policy areas that are really, really important, we're able to engage people on a local level to be able to create the social infrastructure that's required in order to make changes. In other areas, for example, green skills, which are absolutely fundamental if we're going to manage the green transition, develop our green dreams, etc., they don't really capture the popular imagination in quite the same way that that might be quite nice. I don't know, I've got those things reverberating around my mind.
Thanks, Joannie. If it's okay, Michael, we will take you at the end. Is it okay? So if we stop recording now.
Is I think what I'd like to say, just by way of kind of wrapping up my key take homes from this, is about how absolutely vital it is. I mean, we're regional studies scholars. By definition, we care about uneven development, and we care about regional inequality and all of these kind of things. And I feel, you know, that one of the things that's really jumped out at me from today has been how absolutely essential it is that as researchers we use our skills to work with the people who are implementing projects, the people who are working on the ground and within our communities. I feel like it's really, really easy to become kind of siloed into a very particular kind of bubble and forget how it is to talk human, or at least to talk an institutional language that isn't our own. And I just want to say an enormous thank you to Caroline, Stephen, Owen for your time, because, you know, it's the stuff that you do really helps us to keep it real, and it's really nice to hear that the stuff that we do is really helpful for you all as well. Michael, is there anything that you want to say by way of close?
Second your thanks, and thanks to the RSA for the opportunity of bringing us together. There's something a little bit vulnerable for us all, I think, about talking about our relationships and how we work forwards with a lot of place-based projects. So thanks for giving us this space to kind of work it out and think out loud.
Yes, I also am really inspired and so happy to listen to these projects. As I said, I'm from northern Sweden, and the government just made one municipality in northern Sweden, forced them to open a mine. And this municipality is struggling with the population, with really bad economic futures and scenery, and just to hear and to listen to you, and that, I mean, regional transformation is more than only growth, which national government so often makes us want to believe that it has only to do with growth. And local policymakers and practitioners, they know it's not. It's so much more. And it's, yeah, and the redistribution aspect, the justice aspect needs to be highlighted and prioritized every day. So thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for listening.